Good morning, everyone. I'm Beatriz Gonzalez, president of the Wolfson Campus. Thank you all for being here. Welcome to the heart of it all here at the wonderful Wolfson Campus in the dynamic downtown. If you're from out of town, welcome to sunny Miami, maybe, sort of. Yes, it's good. We are in the tropics, and so you should expect to get wet with raindrops as big as your head, not like the little stuff you get in California. I was there, I know the difference. Miami Dade College, as you know, is a community college, and that means that we are of and for the community. So it is very fitting that we convene our community for important conversations in partnership with esteemed organizations like the World Affairs Council Miami. Miami Dade College is known as Democracy's College, and thus we are most honored about this particular conversation in which we'll come to better understand Taiwan's democratic model, as well as explore the future of democracy in Latin America and the Caribbean. And at what a better time than during our nation's celebration of our semi-quincentennial. Based on the speakers present here today, I know it will be a highly informed and nuanced conversation as we all benefit from it and here today co-create the public sphere together. And so now, to further our program, please welcome to the podium the president of Miami Dade College, Madeline Pumariega.
Good morning, everyone, Congressman, Presidente, Ambassador, our friends. Today, we continue to build on the college's mission, Miami-Dade College's mission as Democracy's College. We come off the heels of having the historic announcement at the Freedom Tower last week by the United States Department of Justice, something that our congressman has championed. The only congressman serving in the United States Congress that was born in Cuba and understands firsthand and personally what a communist dictatorship and the tyranny of a dictatorship. And so we are incredibly proud to be hosting this conversation. As Dr. Gonzalez mentioned, not only is this year a year that is important for the United States in commemorating the 250 years of the United States independence, but most importantly, it serves as a year where I just returned from Peru as we celebrated the 200th bilateral relationship that we have with Peru. We here today celebrate Taiwan as a friend, as a neighbor, as a partner, but most importantly, so much to learn from how Taiwan, the Taiwanese people, and their pursuit for democracy can teach us all a lesson or two. But most importantly, I would say that at the college, the Freedom Institute of the America every day is working to make sure that we strengthen those relationships and that we strengthen democracy with all of Latin America, that we make sure that those enduring principles and values of democracy exist in the nations, especially as we see what's happened with Venezuela, Nicaragua, elections, really in this entire Western Hemisphere, that our Secretary of State right here, Marco Rubio from Miami, has been ringing that bell of how important the Western Hemisphere is to the United States, and especially we feel it here every day in South Florida. As you came up the stairs, you saw the countries that represent our students. Our students are from every one of those countries, and also embrace those enduring values of democracy. Democracy can only exist and exist where we have free elections, where we have a free education system, and more importantly, where we have a free economic market, and that there is an opportunity where anyone can prosper that's willing to work hard. So today, this is again our partnership with Aaron, his leadership, everyone at the team there continues to keep at the forefront at Miami Dade College and in our community convenings like this, in which are critically important to advance democracy, continue to keep it at the forefront, and democracy and freedom is worth fighting for, and is so important for our students to understand it so that they can keep that commitment as well. So thank you so much, Aaron Rosen. I want to bring you up now, and you'll come on up. We are so blessed to have someone like Aaron in the World Affairs Council that we work with each and every day. I have to tell you that we're fortunate. Your leadership, your commitment to advance education, to advance democracy, and to make sure that we create these convenings and dialogues are really important, and we appreciate your friendship and partnership at Miami Dade College.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you very much, Madam President, for those very kind words. Good morning, everybody. On behalf of the World Affairs Council of Miami, it is a pleasure to welcome you to this special edition of the Mark Samuelian Distinguished Speaker Series program, examining America at 250, Taiwanese democracy at 30, and the Americas at a crossroads. We are honored to host this program here at Miami Dade College Wolfson Campus in partnership with the Honors College and the MDC Institute for Freedom in the Americas. I understand that some of the Institute's inaugural fellows are listening in, as this is a hybrid program, and joining us here virtually today. I wanted to wish them congratulations on being selected as part of the prestigious first generation of the Freedom Fellows for MDC. We wish you a meaningful and successful experience, and let's give them a round of applause. I would also like to thank the leadership, faculty, staff, and students of Miami Dade College for their continued partnership and commitment to programs like these, and particularly the Presidents Pumariega and Gonzalez for all your support and your friendship and your kindness. Thank you so much. I'd like to recognize now our institutional partners for today's program, the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office, Lazarus Consulting, Spirit of America, the Miami-Dade International Trade Consortium, and the Office of Congressman Carlos Gimenez. Thank you all for your support. For those joining us today for the first time, my name is Aaron Rosen, and I have the privilege of serving as the founding president of the World Affairs Council of Miami. For nearly 5 years, our mission has been simple: to inform, connect, and inspire, because we believe that an informed public is essential to a strong democracy and a free society. Through programs like this, we bring you face-to-face with diplomats, policymakers, journalists, and scholars so that you can engage directly with some of the people helping to shape the world we live in. In doing so, we make the case that Miami is not only about culture, it's not only about finance, technology, or hospitality, it's also increasingly an emerging hub for international affairs. One of the reasons that matters is because exposure to new ideas expands not only our knowledge, but even the vocabulary that we use to understand the world around us. When public discourse becomes reduced to slogans, repetition, outrage, or oversimplified narratives, societies can gradually lose their ability to think critically about complicated issues. Over time, we may find ourselves even lacking the language necessary to imagine alternatives, challenge falsehoods, or propose meaningful solutions. That's why it's important to read broadly, to listen to people we may disagree with, and to learn how different countries and cultures see the world. The more perspectives and intellectual frameworks we expose ourselves to, the better equipped we become to understand and navigate the complex challenges of our time. Programs like this, in some small way, are therefore designed to contribute to that process, to creating a space where people with different perspectives can engage in serious ideas, ask difficult questions, and leave with a broader understanding of the forces shaping our world. This year marks 250 years since the founding of the United States. It also marks 30 years since Taiwan's democratic transition. Both anniversaries, which we will explore today, invite reflection not only on democracy itself, but on the ongoing work required to build and sustain free societies, particularly at a time when certain countries in our own hemisphere find themselves at a crossroads between an autocratic past and the possibility of a free future. These are not abstract ideas. They are deeply connected to the future of our community, our country, and the wider world, and I can think of no better place to have this conversation than today at Democracy's College, at Miami Dade College. We are fortunate to have an outstanding group of speakers with us to help unpack these themes, and I look forward to the discussion ahead. Finally, I'd like to thank our board members, donors, partners, and supporters whose commitments make programs like this possible. The World Affairs Council remains committed to keeping these programs free and open to the public going forward. A special thank you as well to Jonathan Chun for helping organize an authentic Taiwanese culinary market, which will be right outside these doors. Attendees are warmly welcome to and invited to join and enjoy Taiwanese food as soon as this formal program wraps up and we promise not to keep you too long from that food. One final reminder. One of the great strengths of this series is that it brings together students and professionals in the same room. We encourage you to engage thoughtfully, respectfully, and in a spirit of genuine curiosity. It will be my pleasure to return to the stage in a few moments to moderate this afternoon's panel, but before I do, we will hear from some of our partners and our opening speakers. I'd like to first welcome Chris Grozev, Managing Director of Spirit of America, a U.S. nonprofit that works alongside U.S. diplomats and military personnel abroad to promote democratic values through practical assistance. After Chris, we will welcome up Sofiya Korol, Student Government President at Miami Dade College and our very own World Affairs Council of Miami intern, who will be our MC. She will then introduce our speakers and then transitioning our panel. Please join me in giving a hand and welcoming Chris to the stage.
Thank you, Aaron. Good morning, almost good afternoon, everybody. I just have some very brief remarks, both in Spanish and in English. We are in Miami, so Spanish first. Hola, y gracias al World Affairs Council Miami por organizar una discusión tan increíble y importante. Me llamo Chris Grozev y soy un director general en Spirit of America. Para aquellos que no están familiarizados con Spirit of America, somos una organización sin fines de lucro, o 501c3, que conecta e involucra a los ciudadanos y al sector privado en proyectos relacionados con seguridad nacional. Trabajamos directamente con nuestras tropas, diplomáticos y embajadores alrededor del mundo para llenar los vacíos entre las necesidades y lo que el gobierno puede proporcionar. Estamos trabajando y buscamos trabajar en cada rincón del mundo, incluyendo Taiwán y el continente americano. Salúdenme durante la recepción del networking si les gustaría saber más. Gracias. Y ahora en inglés. Thank you to the World Affairs Council Miami for putting together such an incredible, important discussion. My name is Chris Grozev, and I'm a managing director at Spirit of America. For those of you who are less familiar with Spirit of America, we're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that engages citizens and the private sector in national security. We work directly with troops, diplomats, and ambassadors around the world to fill in gaps between what's needed on the ground and what the government can reasonably provide. And we are either working or seeking to work in every single corner of the globe, including Taiwan and across the Americas. Say hello during the networking reception if you'd like to learn more. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Good morning. I'm Sofiya Korol, and I have the honor of serving as the president of the Student Government Association here at Wolfson Campus. So welcome again. Today, I have the privilege to serve as MC and introduce the speakers, the panelists, the moderator. But before I do, I would like to offer a few words about why I greatly appreciate programs like these. I believe that the world of politics, international affairs, government influences each of our lives, whether we see it or not. It influences our grocery prices, gas prices, apartments, jobs, wars, and so much more. As the famous quote goes, just because you don't take an interest in politics doesn't mean politics doesn't take an interest in you. This is why I'm immensely grateful to Miami Dade College, the World Affairs Council of Miami, Model United Nations, the Student Government Associations, these organizations and other such organizations, because they help inform and educate students like myself about the decisions that will influence our lives. Without further ado, I would like to offer some words to introduce our first speaker for today, Carlos Gimenez. Carlos Gimenez serves as U.S. representative in Florida's 28th congressional districts and serves on the House Armed Services Committee, Homeland Security Committee, and the Select Committee on Strategic Competition with China. A former mayor of Miami-Dade County and fire chief of the city of Miami, he brings decades of experience in public service and leadership at local and national levels. Without further ado, please join me in welcoming him to the stage.
Thank you for that kind introduction, and thank you to Madam President, Mr. President, for inviting me here. Are there any other presidents in the House that, before I start, and good morning, my name is Carlos Gimenez, and I proudly represent Florida's 28th Congressional District. It encompasses the areas of Southwest Miami-Dade County and all of Monroe County, which also means that I represent Key West. That's pretty cool, and I like that pretty much. I serve, as stated before, on the House Armed Services Committee. I serve on the subcommittees on tactical air and land and also readiness. And we recently had a very good announcement from the Air Force that a squadron of F-35s is going to come to Homestead Air Force Base, which means Homestead Air Force Base will now have a mission and continue to serve. That's one of the reasons really why I wanted to be on Armed Services, is to make sure that we maintain Homestead Air Force Air Reserve Base with a mission because it's so vital to the economy of Homestead and also vital to the security of our nation. So I'm really proud that we're going to have a squadron of F-35s there. In addition to, we're also going to get upgraded F-16s. So we're actually going to have 2 squadrons there, which actually will increase, the use of that facility. And we're also in the running for Saudi Arabia to have their pilots train on their F-35s, and we're one of 4 different reserve or air bases that are in contention for that. And I think that, coming to South Florida, South Beach and all, I think I'd probably get them, okay? The other reserve bases or the other bases are in the middle of nowhere. And so if they have anything to say about it, I think the Saudis are probably going to come to South Florida. But anyway, that's another thing, another exciting event for Homestead Air Force Base. I serve on the Select Committee. I serve on Homeland Security, too. And so there's a really good nexus between armed services and Homeland Security. There's a lot of things that overlap. And then on top of that, I serve on the Select Committee on the competition between the United States and the Communist Chinese Party. All of those things are intertwined. Defense, Homeland Security, and the Select Committee on China. It's amazing how those topics really kind of all jumble into this, this big ball. And I enjoy spending my time in Congress and being on those committees and getting the information that we need in order to keep the United States safe, keep ourselves safe. And so, again, those are really, really good committees that I really enjoy. As somebody who was born in Cuba and came to the United States after my family fled communism, the values of freedom, democracy, and human dignity are not abstract concepts to me. They are deeply personal. As the United States approaches 250 years of democratic governance, we have an important opportunity not only to reflect on our history, but also to think seriously about the future of democracy, global leadership, and freedom around the world. For nearly 2.5 centuries, the United States has stood as one of the most enduring democratic experiments in human history. Our nation has faced extraordinary challenges: wars, economic crisis, terrorism, political division, and social unrest. Yet through every challenge, our democratic institutions have endured. That endurance matters. At a time when authoritarian regimes are trying to convince the world that democracy is weak, chaotic, or outdated, the United States continues to prove that freedom, stability, and prosperity can coexist. America's strength has never come from perfection. We are not perfect. It has come from resilience, adaptability, and the unwavering commitment to liberty and the rule of law. Democracy can be noisy. It can be frustrating. It can sometimes appear divided. But the ability of citizens to openly challenge leaders, demand accountability, and shape their future through free elections is something millions around the world are still fight and are sacrificing for every single day. As we approach this historic milestone, America must continue sending a clear message to the world: freedom still matters, democratic leadership still matters, and the United States will continue standing with those who seek liberty, human rights, and self-determination. That leadership is especially important at a moment of growing global instability and strategic competition. We are witnessing authoritarian governments attempting to expand their influence economically, militarily, technologically, and politically. They seek to undermine democratic institutions, spread disinformation, and weaken public trust in free societies. Unlike authoritarian powers that rely on coercion and intimidation, the United States leads through partnerships built on trust, shared values, and mutual interests. Our democratic allies strengthen global stability, economic security, and peace. This includes important partners such as Taiwan. Taiwan stands as a powerful example of democratic resilience under constant pressure from an authoritarian regime. Taiwan is not only a critical economic and technological partner, especially in advanced semiconductor manufacturing and global supply chains, it is also a symbol of what democracy can achieve. Supporting Taiwan is more than geopolitics. It's about defending the principle that free people should have the right to determine their own future, free from coercion or intimidation. Preserving peace and stability in the Indo-Pacific is essential not only for the region, but for global economy and the future of democratic leadership. My service on the Select Committee on the Strategic Competition with the United States and the Chinese Communist Party has reinforced the reality that the Chinese Communist Party represents the most significant threat that we, the United States, and the free world face. The CCP seeks to expand its influence through economic coercion, technological dominance, surveillance capabilities, cyber operations, and disinformation campaigns, just to name a few. It increasingly uses gray zone tactics designed to weaken democracies without direct military confrontation. What we have learned through the committee's work is that these challenges are interconnected. Economic security is national security. Technological leadership is national security. Supply chain resilience is national security. Democracies must remain united in protecting critical industries, emerging technologies, and democratic institutions from authoritarian influence and dependence. The answer to these challenges is not to abandon democratic principles. The answer is to strengthen them. We must continue defending free speech, protecting democratic institutions, investing in innovation, and ensuring that democracies can deliver opportunity, security, and prosperity for their citizens. Perhaps nowhere is the importance of freedom more personal to me than the struggles that are happening right now today in Cuba and Venezuela. As someone who was born in Cuba and understands firsthand the consequences of authoritarianism, I believe the lessons democratic nations can share with those aspiring for freedom are critically important. The regimes in Cuba and Venezuela survived through repression, censorship, fear, and the destruction of independent institutions. They silence opposition, control information, and deny their citizens fundamental human rights. But despite decades of oppression, the desire for freedom has never disappeared. The people of Cuba and Venezuela deserve the same freedoms Americans have defended for nearly 250 years. Free elections, free speech, independent institutions, economic opportunity, and the ability to live without fear of political persecution. The United States and democratic allies must continue standing firmly with those fighting for liberty and human rights across our hemisphere and around the world. We must never normalize dictatorship, repression, or political persecution. As we prepare to celebrate America's 250th anniversary, we should remember that democracy is not self-sustaining, for every generation has a responsibility to defend it, strengthen it, and pass it on stronger than they inherited it. And for those that seek peace, and we all seek peace, there is no better path to peace than through democracy. Imagine if all the nations of the world were democratic. We wouldn't have the conflicts that we have today. And we wouldn't have to shed our blood and the blood of our fighting men and women trying to defend freedom. Because remember one thing, and I think Ronald Reagan said, was freedom is not free. And we just celebrated Memorial Day. And we have to honor those that fought for our freedom and continue to fight for our freedom today. Thank you very much, and may God bless you, and may God continue to bless the United States of America.
Thank you so much, Congressman. Thank you for those words on democratic principles and democracy. Next, I would like to welcome our second speaker, Charles Chou. Charles Chou serves as Director General of the Taipei Economic and Cultural Office in Miami. He's a senior Taiwanese diplomat. Welcome, Director Chou.
Thank you.
He's a senior Taiwanese diplomat with extensive experience across the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, including postings in the US and Malaysia, as well as leadership roles in Asian and Pacific affairs and congressional engagements. Let's welcome him.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks a lot. Yeah. Good morning, everyone. My name is Chou. I'm a Consul General of Taiwan in Miami. I must say, I have been to so many countries. I must say, Miami is my very, very favorite place. Just now, the president also asked me, what's for our diplomat? Is there any kind of rotation? Yes, we do have a rotation system. Usually stays a place only for 3 years. I just happened to 3 years already. But I talked to my colleague, we have to keep low profile because I hope my ministry can extend another term. Let me stay here. Yeah, my name is Chou. I'm so honored and delighted to join all of you here for today's seminar. America at 250 and Taiwan at 30, and America's at the Crossroads seminar. Firstly, thank you to our good friend, Aaron Rosen, and the World Affairs Council Miami for organizing and supporting this great event. Of course, we also have partners to work together, including Spirit of America and also Lazarus Consulting and Miami Dade International Trade Consortium. I also greatly appreciate the Congressman Gimenez for taking time to be with us today and for his long-standing support to Taiwan. I know not long ago, the Congressman also traveled to Taiwan to show his support to this democratic country. I also a sincere appreciation to President Pumariega and also the President Gonzalez who led us to coming back this beautiful campus, Miami Dade College, Wolfson Campus. It's so beautiful and it's also multifunctional. I've been here many times. I like it a lot. I told that I hope I can come back to learn Espanol. The first thing I feel regret is that once I came here in 2023, I told myself I should learn Espanol. But during these past 3 years, I didn't do it. If I have another term, the first thing I want to do, study Espanol in Miami Dade College. We are also truly fortunate to have such a knowledgeable panel. Former President, His Excellency Wan Guangdo, and also the Professor Zhang Dai, and also our good friends, Li Lan. And thank you all. Later, you are going to share your valuable time and insight with us all. Today's events actually reflect some incredible milestone for the democracy, both in this country and in Taiwan. On the 4th of July, the United States celebrates 250th anniversary. It marks a start, a democratic model which has inspired the nation worldwide, including Taiwan. This year, Taiwan also celebrates a very special occasion, 30 years since our first direct presidential election. In our culture, 30, it means a lot. 30 symbolizes maturity. He also saying that in Mandarin, we're saying 30而立. It means that our democracy is no longer young. It actually is a robust and vibrant. Since our first direct presidential election in 1996, we have held 8 consecutive elections with all transition of the power being smooth and peaceful. Our story can be a good example that demonstrates to the world that democratization and economic growth can go hand in hand. It allows us, a small island nation, to be a global leader in innovation, AI, and semiconductors. However, I must admit that This journey is not being easy. It's a story of resilience and hope. We have to fight hard for the liberty we enjoy today. It is a constant reminder to cherish our freedoms and democracy. Recently, under the constant political pressure and military threat from Beijing, our President, His Excellency Lai Ching-te, resolutely state once again that Taiwan's future should be decided by Taiwanese people. Taiwan should not give up its democratic and the free way of the life. It is not Taiwan. It is China, the source of regional instability. The security cooperation between Taiwan and the U.S. and the continued U.S. arms sales to Taiwan, I must say, is crucial to maintaining the regional peace and stability and prosperity. The President Lai also said that only the strength can bring the peace and underscore the urgent needs to boost Taiwan's own self-defense capability. While we navigate such external threats, we are reminded once again, just like the Congressman had mentioned, freedom is not free. We must fight to protect it. This special year, like 250th anniversary for United States and 30th anniversary for Taiwan, actually is not a coincidence. Our thriving civil society are the result of the great leadership and also an informed population. Like our American friends, Taiwanese people are active and passionate about shaping our own future. If we want to continue to truly prosper, innovate, and express ourselves freely, the global democratic community must continue to collaborate. Working together, we can safeguard democracy for many generations to come. In closing, I hope all those countries still fighting for democracy and economic success can be inspired by American model and Taiwan story. I also wish the friendship between Taiwan and United States can continue to become stronger and closer. Again, thank you all for coming today, and please enjoy the discussion later with all the panelists. Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Director General. This concludes our speaker portion for this afternoon, and now we go into our panel discussion. I will read the biographies of our panelists and moderator, and when I read your biography to our panelists and moderator, please join me on the stage. Our panelists, Juan Guaido. Juan Guaido served as interim president of Venezuela from 2019 to 2023 and served as former president of the National Assembly. He is an internationally recognized leader in the fight for democratic governance. He continues to be an influential voice on political transition and democracy in Latin America. Please give him a warm welcome. Our panelist, Leland Lazarus. Leland Lazarus is the founder and CEO of Lazarus Consulting, where he advises on geopolitical risk related to China's engagement in the Western Hemisphere. A former U.S. diplomat and special assistant at the U.S. Southern Command, he is president and chair of the Fulbright Alumni Association, a Council on Foreign Relations term member, and frequent media commentator on global affairs. Please join me in welcoming him. Panelist John Tai. John Tai is a professorial lecturer at the George Washington University Elliott School of International Affairs, and senior advisor at Pumariega Consulting. He is an expert on China, Taiwan, and Indo-Pacific security. He has supported the U.S. intelligence community and teaches at the State Department's Foreign Service Institute. Let's give him a warm welcome. Last but not least, our moderator. You've heard his name already, Aaron Rosen. Aaron Rosen is the founding president of the World Affairs Council of Miami, Miami's leading nonpartisan platform on foreign affairs. He is a Council on Foreign Relations term member, 2024 Eisenhower Fellow, and media commentator on global affairs. He previously held international policy roles in Moscow, Washington, D.C., and Brussels, including roles at MUFG Bank and the European Parliament. Without further ado, please welcome Aaron to the stage.
Great job, Sofiya. Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me okay? Sofiya is a perfect example of not just the type of interns that the World Affairs Council takes on, but also the type of students that Miami Dade College cultivates, and we're very excited. I'm not sure if you mentioned it, but Sofiya just got accepted to transfer to Georgetown University, where she's going to be starting next semester. Congratulations, Sofiya. Well, that was really excellent. We really appreciate our intro speakers, and we hope that that served as a starting platform for the conversation we're going to dive into here with our esteemed panelists. We're also then going to open up for audience Q&A, and then as a reminder, we'll have continued networking outside over authentic Taiwanese food. So sit tight, stick around, and please do engage. And we'll set up the microphones for audience Q&A toward the end of the round. I'd like to start at the end of the line with President Guaido. At a certain point, millions of Venezuelans and much of the democratic world saw you as representing the possibility, first in a generation, in multiple generations, of a democratic future for your country. Looking back on that experience now, what lessons can you share about the strengths and vulnerabilities of democratic movements operating in authoritarian systems, particularly for those of us here in the audience that may not have ever experienced firsthand the power and pressures inside an authoritarian system, inside a dictatorship?
Well, thank you for the invitation. Thank you for Congressman and his strong voice in democracy, Venezuela, Cuba, Latin America. President, Madam President, thank you for welcoming us in this important stage. Taiwan are struggling with his democracy also, so we are close. About Venezuela, I mean, Latin America, we are living in a pivotal moment, not only for Latin America, I think for the rest of the world, when we're facing the crisis in Iran, also the recent meeting back in China. I mean, it's not only about Venezuela, but yes, it is about democracy. The congressman speak about this, the values of democracy, and that's the struggle, the fight back in Venezuela. And democracy is not only about an idea, it's also about the day-to-day issues, like the president of the students say. It's about the prices of oil here in the US, but it's also about medicine, food, the liberty of choice, the freedom of choice, in everyday choice in the case of Venezuela. Look, democracy didn't collapse in one day. Not happened back in Venezuela. It wasn't overnight, the collapse of our democracy back in Venezuela. I was born in a democratic Venezuela. I only have 15 years old when Chavez took power in an election, by the way, in 1998. He used the democratic tools to dismantle the democracy, one power at a time, the judicial system, the freedom of speech back in Venezuela. And the Venezuelan regime is not trying to, by the way, persuade only the people. They're trying to exhaust them. In some point, they try to win by exhaustion. And that's why democracy is also about resistance. It's not only the courage of a big momentum. like the interim government, or like Maria Corina Machado with his Nobel Peace Prize, or Edmundo González Urrutia winning an incredible election back in 2024. It's about resistance. It's about resilience also. And that's why we have an opportunity back in Venezuela, in Cuba. I have to, of course, talk about the strong leadership of President Trump, his determination. I remember perfectly our meeting back in 2020 in the Oval Office, is speaking about democracy, in how to restore democracy back in Venezuela. His determination, his resilience, his leadership also made possible this moment. The democracy or the restoration of democracy, and Taiwan knows about this, is not about isolation, by the way. You need and we need international allies, not only to promote a cause, but also to help with tools, communication, not only avoid, to confront misinformation that they use, as China use, as a weapon to distort. So in this moment, the solidarity, yes, works with actions. And that's where we saw in this moment. In bottom line, in this moment, also we have to talk about the resistance of our people back in Venezuela. His resilience, I mean, one and again, struggling, fighting, and the possibility of an election in Venezuela, it's also important. And Cuba, we are very excited also back in Venezuela, in the democratic fight for seeing not only a free Venezuela, a free continent, and the possibility that that pivotal moment means to democracy around the world, for Taiwan, for the influence of democracy and his values around the world.
Thank you, President Guaido. That transitions us very nicely to my next question for Leland, which is more on some of those challenges to democracy that you mentioned, particularly misinformation, disinformation tactics. Leland, you've argued on the press and in your writings that many of China's overseas influence techniques, some of which the president mentioned, were actually first pioneered and first refined in Taiwan and then appeared elsewhere. I'm curious what advice you might have for Americans, for Latin Americans, about how to understand how modern authoritarian influence works, and particularly how it works inside and against democratic societies.
Well, first and foremost, Aaron, thank you so much for bringing us together to talk about this important event. And it's an honor for Lazarus Consulting to join forces with you. Thank you so much for the other organizations. And President Guaido, John, it's a pleasure to be on this panel with you. I do want to take a step back and just take stock in how far our democracies really have come. 2.5 centuries of American democracy going through civil war and Cold War and protests and political polarization, and yet our democratic institutions still stand. That is something that we need to be very proud of. And how the American Revolution also inspired revolutions all throughout Latin America and the Caribbean, right? Simón Bolívar, for example, right? And President Guaido, just like what you mentioned, we may very well see, hopefully, in the next few months, a region that will truly be free of communism. That will be amazing and it'll be a blessing for sure. And with regard to Taiwan, I travel to Taiwan very often for work. And one of the most recent trips I took to Taiwan was actually on February 27th, and the next day was February 28th. For those who are not familiar with Taiwan history, February 28th, the 228 incident is extremely important in Taiwanese history. This is February 28th, 1947, so 2 years before the nationalist KMT ultimately lost the civil war to the communists. But on Taiwan, there was a movement, protests from young people like MDC students here, young people, academics, freedom fighters, who were fed up with what they viewed as an authoritarian regime on the part of Chiang Kai-shek. And unfortunately, the KMT responded with huge oppression. And there's debate about how many people perished that day, but it was anywhere between 18,000 to 28,000 people were put down and perished that day. And so to think about that dark history, the White Terror, right, where the KMT basically ruled with an iron fist, and anybody who was speaking out against that government was cut down. To go from there to then 30 years ago, where Taiwan had its first direct election, and now 30 years later, it is one of the most vibrant economies in the world, the most vibrant democracies in the world. I think it's just surpassed India as the 5th largest economy in the world, right? That in and of itself is an absolute miracle. And I think there's a lot that the whole world, certainly the US, certainly Latin America and the Caribbean, but really all democracies around the world can really learn from Taiwan's example. That being said, as you said, Aaron, the more and more I visit Taiwan, the more and more I realize that the CCP uses its playbook to destabilize democracies. And it uses Taiwan as a testing ground first, before it's then deployed overseas. And I want to give just a couple of vignettes of how that looks like on the ground, right? First and foremost, just a couple weeks ago, the chairwoman of the KMT, Zheng Liwen, she visited Beijing when I was also in the ground in Taipei. And it was very interesting, the narratives that were happening both on the ground in Taipei and also in Beijing. There's a political leader of the political opposition going to Beijing, almost like kowtowing towards the 21st century imperial leader Xi Jinping. Of course, from her perspective, she's trying to extend the olive branch and trying to see whether there is an area of potential collaboration between the KMT and China. But also that week, another local politician, and she's from the Taiwan People's Party, the TPP. She was indicted because she was chatting with a CCP official in China to basically say, hey, as a local legislator, I'm going to push to try to pass legislation so that Chinese citizens who are living in Taiwan, it'll be easier for them to get Taiwanese citizenship so that they can vote in local elections and influence local politics. That is very, very similar to an indictment that just happened a couple weeks ago in Arcadia, California, right? Where the mayor of Arcadia admitted to being an agent of the CCP, right? Mayor, right? In the US. You see this happen in Latin America and the Caribbean as well. I'm American, but of Panamanian descent. There's a member on the board of the Panama Canal Authority, and his name is Jorge Gonzalez Barrios. He has been accused of taking money and taking bribes from the CCP in order to influence various Chinese projects in and around the Panama Canal, which of course is a huge issue to our national security. So I just wanted to give a couple of those vignettes to see, a playbook that starts in Taiwan and is then expanded throughout the whole world. And I think that if we see what happens in Taiwan, we sort of know they're the canary in the coal mine, and we can make sure that all of our democracies can kind of steel ourselves and protect ourselves from what is already happening.
Thank you, Leland. I want to get back to that in a second and actually talk about how do we actually protect ourselves. But before doing so, I want to pivot over to John here. As Leland mentioned, democracy in Taiwan, and really democracy anywhere, is neither inevitable nor necessarily predictable. And in the case of Taiwan, it came after a tremendous amount of bloodshed and difficulties in the past. In the United States, we're used to thinking that countries are born democratic and that's how it's always been. But for countries like Taiwan, they had to achieve that, and they achieved that in many of our lifetimes here. I'm curious for the audience, could you share a bit of how that process happened? Who were the key actors? We don't have to name names, more grand figures and momentums and movements that helped the country transition from military rule and dictatorship to one of the world's most vibrant democracies. And let's keep in mind that there are people in diaspora communities here in South Florida, Venezuelan, Cuban, and beyond, that are looking for case studies, that are looking for models of how countries manage that transition, and ideally do so without civil war, without bloodshed, but in peace, harmony, and prosperity.
Thanks, Aaron. Just want to echo all the speakers, or my fellow panelists here, to thank you, thank all the sponsors. It's really an honor, pleasure to be here. First time in Miami. I will come back. I will spend more time here. So, and to Sofiya, congratulations on Georgetown, but you should have gotten to George Washington. But anyway, with that being said, no, I think it's a great question. I think right off the bat, I think the Taiwan experience, and this is a consensus, I think, among scholars, is notable for its peaceful transition. It's not to say, as Leland mentioned, there was violence early on, especially during the authoritarian government. It is not to say that there was no struggles, and there definitely was. One of the most episodic moments was in the late 1970s, in which you really had violence, you had protesters, you had opposition politicians and activists colliding with the authoritarian police, military police. But in terms of the transition itself that ultimately led to Taiwan's democracy, that happened about 30 years ago, it was a relatively peaceful transition. And there are a couple of reasons for why that happens. And one of the, I think the key part of it is that it really was something that involved a lot of different forces, different actors. We certainly have people who are outside the authoritarian government, who are actively promoting reforms, who are actively promoting democratization. And they included people from a wide range of sub-ethnic groups in Taiwan, including those that were already in Taiwan, his family been there before 1949, as well as those who had gone to Taiwan with the KMT government, with Chiang Kai-shek after 1949. So it really was a coalition of many people from different backgrounds who said we want democracy. We want to hold this government accountable. So that's definitely there. But another thing is, the key part of it is also within the authoritarian government, the KMT, there were also reformers, especially as time went by. You had people within the government, within the regime, that were younger, they were born in Taiwan, and they looked at Taiwan as their home. And they wanted Taiwan to be more democratic along with what the Constitution said, right? Ultimately, the Constitution of the Republic of China says, ultimately, Taiwan, or the Republic of China, that's the official name of Taiwan, is to be a democracy. And so you have this confluence of forces that are outside the authoritarian regime, as well as reformers from within, that came together and agreed that ultimately that transition has to take place, that ultimately for the good of Taiwan, for the future of Taiwan, and I'm not suggesting that there's no self-interest involved here. The KMT wanted to continue to survive. The reality that they couldn't go back to mainland China, that's a very real thing. But in order to survive, they need to be seen as a part of Taiwan. They need to have that buy-in. And so all of those forces come together, essentially pave the way for a relatively peaceful transition that we see in Taiwan today. Now, there is one third element before we move on, but I think we're going to talk about that later on, which is the external elements. So far, those are the internal elements within Taiwan. I think later on, we'll talk more about the external element, and that's also very important in promoting advancing Taiwan's democratization effort.
Thank you very much, Sean, and we'll definitely come back to that. Very important point. Pivoting back to President Guaido, you opened up talking about this, but I'd like to dig in a bit deeper. Quite obviously, following the arrest and capture of Maduro, Venezuela has entered a moment that is exciting, uncertain, filled with possibility, filled with anxieties, all at the same time. In periods like this, I think a lot of people are looking for advice of what happens next and how to maximize the likelihood for a successful, free, and prosperous Venezuela. You know this country better than most people alive and have been through some of its highest highs and lowest lows. What could you tell us and sort of what advice could you give about the greatest risks that democratic movements face internally within them, politically, psychologically, strategically, and how can those democratic movements and opposition movements avoid repeating mistakes of the past to ensure the highest likelihood of a successful outcome this time around in Venezuela?
Well, thank you for the question. Just add one name, Rivera, who was indicted here in Miami and found guilty, by the way, in the same manual or playbook that in Taiwan, that in California. I mean, it's a system, again, that always threats democracy. And democracy is always under threat by authoritarian regimes, and how to face them, how to rebuild, I think it's trust. I mean, the trust between citizens and the state. And these kind of regimes, they destroy the confidence, even in the citizen, in his capabilities to protest, to raise his voice. That's why they put in jail people that send tweets or put comments online. That's why the censorship, that's why the persecution, the political prisoners. I mean, they destroy the confidence, the trust in the citizens, in the institutions, and that's important because if you see any policeman, officer, women and men here in Miami, by the way, you feel confident. I mean, if you see a police officer back in Venezuela, or for sure in Cuba, you feel fear because they're going to extortion you or maybe put in jail. I mean, my two daughters were persecution by the police officer and Guardia Nacional back in Venezuela. When Merida born in 2021, they took the clinic, all the clinic. Nobody can get in or get out when my daughter born. And in this moment, it's not only about when it's going to be the election. That matters for sure. I mean, we need to rebuild the confidence between citizens and his representative. I mean, they need to elect someone who can confident, who can trust, but it's also how to rebuild the confidence between the people and that police officer that put him on jail. You know? I mean, and it's not gonna be easy. It's not gonna be overnight like the US took Maduro, by the way. That operation was overnight, but rebuild, it's gonna take time, and we're making the steps to promote that. That's why we talk in a simple way about elections. I mean, it's not that simple, for sure, but that's the steps to promote the reconstruction. And also, of course, it's about the day-to-day for the citizens. I mean, again, the food, the medicine, the economic. I mean, Venezuela is an humanitarian crisis, ongoing humanitarian crisis. Still it is. It's not because Maduro is in New York, thank God, by the way, in jail. It's not that's why tomorrow the people is fair enough to live back with opportunities back in Venezuela. So, like the regime weakened, one institution at a time, we have to rebuild. One institution, not only at a time, maybe several. The judicial system, the confidence of the trust on social media is not only a Venezuelan issue, it's a worldwide issue, and it's going to be important for the future how to gain that confidence between the continent, you know? It's going to be very important how to, it's not going to be the socialismo del siglo XXI, el Foro de Puebla, back in early this century. It has to be about the people, not about ideology. It needs to be about the reconstruction, the values, the democracy, the liberty in short term. So, bottom line, I have to say I'm very optimistic because our people not only resist, the values of democracy back in Venezuela, back in Latin America, and we are taking the steps with the US, for sure, and the determination of the President Trump and the 47th administration. We have to face 45th administration, a pandemic situation, 46 and 47. I mean, the second term of President Trump removed by the law a dictatorship regime. That also changed all the geopolitical perspective. Why? Because when you indict Raúl Castro, they believe, you know? Before Maduro was impunity, not only in Latin America, around the world. In this moment, the correlation of power, of leverage, is different. And that's a good news, not only for Venezuela, for Cuba, for Nicaragua, and for the rest, for sure, of the world and the democracy in the next generations. In this moment, I talk about a pivotal moment for Latin America. I mean, it's a pivotal moment for the rest of the century, I have to say. It's democracy or authoritarianism. And I think we're gonna walk through La Habana and Caracas very soon, my dear friend.
Thank you very much. Leland, I want to transition over to you because in your last remarks, you touched on Taiwan as essentially a testing ground of Chinese Communist Party tactics, disinformation, democratic erosion. And yet at the same time, Taiwan is perhaps among the most resilient democracies, the most successful at countering these tactics, at diluting their efficacy. I'm curious from your perspective, what lessons those of us here in the United States, but also our partners and friends and allies in Latin America, can take from Taiwan, not just to recognize the threats and the challenges, but to integrate and apply strategies for countering them that are successful and that lead to stronger, more resilient, more vibrant, and more defensible democracies.
It's tough. It is tough because I mean, Taiwan is literally under constant pressure day in and day out. And that playbook that we talked about, whether it be elite capture from the CCP, right? So elite capture, disinformation, economic coercion, cyber attacks. I mean, Taiwan deals with that literally on a daily basis. And I would say the biggest challenge is how do you, at least the biggest challenge from the Taiwanese government is how do you notify and educate the local population about these things in a fractured political environment and make sure that those things do not get politicized, right? So I think in the same way that there's huge political polarization here in the US, it's the same, if not worse, over in Taiwan, right? For those of you who are not necessarily so familiar with what's going on there, but you know, obviously the Democratic People's Party, the Green Party, is in power, and the KMT Blue Party, you know, opposition. There are things that easily get politicized with what the DPP does. Even simple things like sending out a orange booklet to every single Taiwanese citizen on, hey, if an emergency happens, if an invasion or quarantine or whatnot happens, this is what to do. You know, Taiwanese politicians, the DPP politicians get criticized, oh, you're warmongering, or oh, this is, you're hyping this up as you know, too much of an issue. So I think in terms of lessons learned, you know, I think that supporting NGOs that are maybe seen as a little bit less political is, I think, absolutely key. You've got a vibrant civil society in Taiwan. Doublethink Lab is one of them. Doublethink Lab is an anti-disinformation organization. It started off very scrappy, I would say maybe a decade or so ago. But now it hosts an annual, you know, PRC in the World Conference where they bring hundreds of like-minded investigative journalists, NGO leaders, human rights activists, all together, either in Taipei or somewhere else around the world, and they compare and contrast. What is the Chinese doing in my country? How's the playbook working in your country? And really figuring out best practices and ways to deal with that. Some other organizations, Forward Alliance and Kuma Academy. Look those two organizations up because they're absolutely amazing. Created by, again, local Taiwanese leaders who are mobilizing amongst themselves to teach everyday Taiwanese people how do you, do a tourniquet, how do you do first aid, how do you survive in the mountains, how do you spot disinformation, right? Again, telling the story about the playbook so that more and more people are aware of it. And I think, if organizations in the United States and in Latin America and the Caribbean work more closely with civil society organizations like Doublethink Lab, like Kuma Academy, like Forward Alliance, I think it will really go a long way in building up that democratic resilience.
Thank you very much, Leland. Pivoting over to John, I want to touch on that third element that you mentioned before, which is the external role, both the external role by positive actors that are helping democratic movements flourish, as well as the external role that can be negative with countries working to support authoritarian regimes against democratic aspiring civil society. How did that play out in Taiwan that allowed this country to transition largely peacefully to democracy?
Yeah, thank you. So, obviously, as Leland talked about, right now the biggest external force that's negative-wise against Taiwan is the CCP. It's coming from China. But going back a little bit in terms of what are the external forces that facilitate, that or at least contributed to Taiwan's transition, we have to think about the United States, right? Now, this is not to say that the United States was always altruistic. We had strategic interests. There was reason for us to want to support Taiwan beyond simply democratization or human rights. But there were also elements within the United States that were very supportive of Taiwan when it comes to democratization, when it comes to human rights. And those elements often are found in Congress. Congress was very key in terms of supporting Taiwanese dissidents to be in the United States and supporting their advocacy in the United States. Congress ultimately was also very instrumental in creating the law that continued our U.S. formal relationship with Taiwan even after the United States had normalized its relationship with the People's Republic of China. And by that means, it enabled Taiwan to continue to progress politically and ultimately facilitated a foundation for Taiwan's eventual regime transition. And I think it's worth noting that Taiwan is the first, I believe, first foreign mission in the United States that actually created an entire department within the mission dedicated to congressional affairs. And I think afterwards, all the other foreign missions followed suit in the United States because it realized the importance that Congress had played in promoting and supporting Taiwan's democratic transition, its human rights, and so on and so forth. So I think, if you look at it that way, just to be honest about this, United States, we certainly have supported the military regime, the autocratic regime, before the transition, largely for strategic interests. But there are also elements within the United States, notably Congress, other groups as well, that had supported Taiwan's democratic transition. And the reality is nothing is ever really clean, nothing is ever really straightforward. And part of the beauty about democracy is that it is a contested system. We often think of democracy that, it should be peaceful and so on and so forth. I think that's an outcome that we all desire. But a healthy democracy is also that is a contested democracy. So one thing that I'll just share with you is a former student of mine said in my class once, because, you look at Taiwan's democracy, it can get a little messy. You see different politicians from different side of the aisle getting into fisticuffs, for instance. And for some of us, it was a little bit feeling a little uneasy. But one of my students said to him, as he's an American student, said, that actually shows that people care. That they care enough that they want to go into battle, right? And the truth of the matter is there's a lot of truth in that, is that when we start taking democracy for granted, we become complacent. If you constantly have to fight, you constantly have to compete, and it is a contest of ideas, we can probably do less with the fisticuffs, but certainly we can have contests for ideas and exchange, and that's what the beauty of democracy is. Because as we all know, in an autocratic system, you do not have competition for ideas, right? So, anyway.
So John, are you saying that the UFC cage that's being built in the White House right now, that's really for congressmen to kind of duke it out?
I am not wading into that discussion. I am merely saying that for democracy, a vibrant democracy is a contested democracy. And there are many different ways by which you can contest democracy, right? And I think so. I think that's a very. And I'll just leave this thing. And Aaron said before we got up here that, and I think he really was talking to me, is spare the academic jargon. But I will just throw one out, right? The term consolidated democracy, right? Taiwan is what we call a consolidated democracy. Really what that means is that democracy is widely accepted within Taiwan to be the only political game in town. No one is considering changing the government by any other means. And they have done so peacefully for several terms now. We have seen several terms of peaceful transition between political parties. And I think that is something that despite all the contests, they all agree that democracy is best. And in fact, Taiwan's political identity is really wrapped around the fact that it is a democracy. And I think that's important for its democratic resilience.
Thank you very much. We have one last quick question each, and then we're open up for audience Q&A. So I'd encourage you guys to try to be concise in this just because I want to make sure we get to the audience, but I don't want to skip over it because these are important topics, and this is a fantastic panel, and I want to dive into this a little bit deeper. To President Guaido, I think a lot of us are looking at Venezuela and trying to understand what to make of what's happening, and really what indicators to look at to know whether profound change is happening or simply superficial change is happening, whether there's real change, real reform happening, or whether it's just changes in leadership at the top. From your perspective, what would you advise us to look at to get to know whether the change is real or simply managed?
Well, the main indicator is going to be the election. I mean, the announcement of a schedule. You know, it hasn't to be right now, but we need a schedule, not only for the confidence, the trust, but also to a horizon, you know, for the people. I mean, and nothing better to economics, democracy by certainty. I mean, uncertainty feed first and scare people, also enterprises, by the way. And if you want to recover it, for example, the oil industry back in Venezuela, you're going to need investment. And that also needs certainty, confidence. I mean, it's the basis on economy, on family, on a system, on democracy. So that's the main one. But also, for example, Alex Saab, the main testaferro, I don't know the translation into English to that word, the man who keep the money for Maduro. I'm sorry for the translation. He also in jail here in the US. He estuvo also, he was also in jail back in 2020, by the way. But for a bad negotiation in 2022, they sent back to Venezuela. That kind of indicators, Maduro in jail, Alex Saab back in Venezuela, other testaferros for the regime, Vladimir Parino Lopez, who was the Secretary of War back in Venezuela, is removing from his charge. El fiscal, the prosecutor, but is removing also. I mean, again, democracy, we don't lose democracy overnight, and this is a transition. I mean, a transition does not begin with the fall of the tyrant. It could begin with that. The military sector, the trust, the elections are going to be centrals in this process. Good news, we have a strong opposition with a strong leadership, Maria Corina Machado, Mundo González Urrutia. I'm in exile in this moment, but we are building a strong grassroots also that made possible win an impossible election back in 2024 with a proxy candidate who turns president-elect in a dictatorial regime. So that's all good news. But in short term, we have to look and ask also for that schedule. I mean, we could talk about oil sector. We could talk about the national electoral system. We can talk about the judicial system. But again, step by step, if a huge task challenge for Venezuela and for Latin America, for the US to accompany this process, but we are in a good path in this moment to recovery democracy back in Venezuela. And this is important. We Venezuelans want full democracy, not the half of our democracy. I don't, in any circumstance, to my two daughters, Miranda, who is 9, or Meria, who is 4 years old, hey, you have to struggle for the half of your rights, you know? You have to get the half, 25%, and that's okay. No. We're citizens. We have plenty of our rights. And our rights, and we Venezuelans are used to, we fight for them. If you took it for granted, for sure you're going to lose it. I mean, and democracy is always under threat. We have to fight for, stand up, and go for it. So, as you can see, I'm again optimistic about the situation back in Venezuela, Latin America, and you want to achieve a full transition to democracy very soon.
Thank you very much. Leland, pivoting over to you for a second. I mean, if we look at Venezuela and we look at Cuba, these systems are not very attractive to a lot of other people, whether in the United States or other countries, due to economic collapse, political repression, general structural erosion. But if we pivot over the Pacific and look at China, the opposite is true. In fact, for many developing countries, they see China as a model, and China certainly markets itself as a model, a developing country that became developed, that markets itself at times as even more efficient, more decisive than democracies, which are chaotic, messy, sometimes resulting in fistfights. For those countries and those citizens of democracies here in the United States or in Latin America, how can we push back on that? How can we market democracy to other countries that are deciding whether to pursue an authoritarian or democratic path, and say that, you know, democracies can also deliver for the people. Democracies can produce efficiently. Democracies can raise living standards. It's not just the Chinese model. Other countries, democratic systems can do it as well. How would you market democracy?
Well, first and foremost, sorry, can you hear me? Okay. Yeah, first and foremost, just off of what you were saying, President Guaido, about democracy, you know, we don't want half of rights, right? And that we want to, it's a step-by-step process. I mean, Taiwan's democratic transition was the same, right? When Chiang Kai-shek, you know, passed away, and his son, right, Chiang Ching-kuo, came into power in the 1980s. He was more of a little bit more reformist and gave more and more rights, and then slowly but surely, Taiwan became more and more democratic. So to your point, you know, you actually just went to China, right? Aaron just went to China, and you also went to Taiwan. So you got to really see both sides of the story. And I know you and I have had this conversation about, you know, very much on the surface, when you're there on the ground, you see the incredible developments in the electric vehicle industry. So BYD, NIO, and XPeng. When you see the developments in AI and how they're applying it in robotics, it's very, very interesting. But then you also realize that, you know, you can be innovative up to a point in an authoritarian regime, and just ask, you know, some of the most innovative people in China, like Jack Ma, you know, Where is he, right? Some of these, great CEOs, innovators in China, they realize very quickly that there is always that red line. And sometimes you know where that red line is, sometimes you don't. And ultimately that stifles innovation. It stifles the ability to have freedom of expression. I remember distinctly when I served in China as a US diplomat, I remember watching international CNN one morning, and right before the journalist or correspondent was about to report on something negative about China, the screen went black, right? And it was black for 3 minutes during that report, and then the TV came back on again, right? It's an odd experience to, again, live in a country where you walk in the streets and everything seems so fine and totally normal, but you also realize that there is always that red line there, and you never know exactly when you'll cross that, right? I'm sure it was similar when you also lived in Russia. So I think, what do we do to address that? This sounds very sort of bread and butter, but I think sharing more of those stories across different democracies so that one narrative isn't just coming out of China and is being consumed is, I think, absolutely key going forward.
Thank you very much, Leland. Super important. Thank you for sharing that. John, I want to close with you, and then we'll open up for audience Q&A. You had mentioned something really important, which is that in the case of Taiwan and its transition to democracy, the United States, almost paradoxically, played kind of two roles. It was a partner and a key ally of the military dictatorship, the military regime, but it also has been the key ally and partner of Taiwan's flourishing and vibrant democracy, and was also a key partner in the democratic process and democratization of Taiwan. You're a professor at GW. I also studied at GW. As you know, it can be in vogue right now to be critical, to hate on the United States and say, it's all about power. That the U.S. doesn't really support democracy. That it's just about, we ally too easily with dictatorships. I think Taiwan shows that both things can be true. That paradoxes exist in politics and in foreign policy, and the United States has and continues to have relationships for strategic purposes with non-democratic countries, but has also been one of the most impactful and positively influential countries that facilitated democratic movements globally. So for those, turning back to Latin America, for those looking for assistance, for those looking for support, whether in Venezuela, whether in Cuba or beyond, Nicaragua, what role can and should the United States play as a friend for democratic peoples and movements to help people in authoritarian countries know that they are not alone?
Yeah, thanks, Aaron. I'll answer it this way. Everyone knows what the American dream is, right? Does everyone know what the American dream is? What's the American dream? Freedom? What else? Liberty, okay. What else? Something more concrete. Opportunities. Right. House, yes, right? House, picket fence, pets, cars. Yeah, you have the right, you have to get the job that you want, you can do whatever you can do what you want within legal parameters. But the idea is that it allows individuals to flourish, right? That's the key for American dream. If that means you got to go to the baseball park and watch baseball all the time, fine, right? But that's the American dream. A couple years ago, Xi Jinping came on board. He announced that China also has a dream, the China dream. What's the China dream? Pardon me? Take over Taiwan. Well, not exactly, but so.
Kind of.
Yeah. But the point is, the China dream is not at all like the American dream. The American dream speaks of individuals being able to flourish economically, politically, culturally. The China dream, and that's more or less a bottom-up dream, right? It's you talk about, someone talked about soft power, right? The China dream is a top-down dream. That dream is a elite, politically elite-led aspiration that includes taking over Taiwan eventually, right? Unification, right? To rejuvenate the Chinese nation, right? And so right there, I want to say that is because, as you pointed out, Aaron, U.S. has played paradoxical, maybe even contradictory roles throughout, right, in the case of Taiwan. But at the end of the day, what America presents is a set of ideals, and ideals that individuals can aspire to, not something that is led by the political elite or dictated by the political elite. It is something that everyone can aspire to have economic freedom, to have political freedom, right? So again, I think, for our folks, our friends in Latin America, as you're going through your struggles, as they're going through their own political struggles, I think understanding that the U.S. is in many ways provides inspirations, it provides support, but you also have to understand that the United States, because democracy is contested, we're going to have different groups. We're going to have different interests, and the U.S. has different interests. And even if you go back to Taiwan, I'll use the illustration. Yes, we supported the military autocratic regime of Chiang Kai-shek, but that also preserved Taiwan as an independent entity. If the United States had not supported that regime, there would probably be no Taiwan today. But through that, by supporting that regime, maintain Taiwan, but then later on enable Taiwan to be able, supported Taiwan to eventually make the transition to become a democracy. So I think the short answer that I'm saying is there's no real concise, straightforward, clear-cut answer, right? The United States, as Congressman mentioned, is flawed. We're not perfect. And we're struggling, and we're fighting, and we're competing all the time. But what the United States, I think, represent is a point in which we can provide ideals, we can provide inspirations, we can provide resources, and we can advocate. And I think we can still do that, all right? And so in that sense, but at the end of the day, I will say, a democracy, if you look at through history in terms of democratic, successful democratization, all the successful cases are ones in which the people of those countries decide for themselves that this is what they want. It can't be something that's going to be driven from the outside. America as an external force can provide support, but people in Venezuela, people in Cuba, they have to want this, and they have to be willing to fight for it. And that ultimately will determine whether democracy will come to being, survive, and thrive. All right, so.
We'll take a few questions from the audience. I believe that there are microphones set up on both wings of the seating. So if you just go up and briefly just state your name, introduce yourself, and then ask your question. I think the mics are on the sides. And yeah, we have a couple people going ahead. And just briefly state your name and then the question, please. Thanks.
Sorry. Hello, does this work? Yep. All right. Hi, my name is Aiden Papke. I'm a student down the road at FIU. Happy to have so many fellow Panthers in the room with me today. I want to thank you guys for coming out to our community and talking about something so important. So my question goes back to the first question that was asked to Leland about how China tends to use Taiwan as sort of a testing ground for some of its foreign policy. So back a few weeks ago, we saw China collaborate with some of its allies in the Indian Ocean and convince them to restrict airspace access to a Taiwanese jet that was supposed to carry Taiwanese President Lai to the continent of Africa on a diplomatic visit. And this, at first, of course, canceled the visit. The airspace was restricted. The president couldn't find a way to get to Africa until an African president offered his own private jet to come to Taiwan and pick him up. So my question is, can we expect to see China do similar things, not just to Taiwan, but potentially even the United States? You know, this sort of direct impediment of diplomatic affairs from one nation to another? And if so, how could we expect to see that play out against the United States? Thanks.
I mean, I think to a certain extent we are already seeing that play out in terms of the ways in which the PRC uses economic coercion, right? We saw in plain sight last year when there was the U.S.-China trade dispute. We, of course, increased tariffs by over 100%. But the Chinese responded by then restricting the exports of rare earth minerals, right? And to me, I saw that as, wow, we've seen that playbook happen against, say, a Lithuania, right, in Eastern Europe, when Lithuania wanted to stand up a Taiwan Economic and Cultural Office, and China responded via economic means. We see that with, even in this region, Guatemala and Paraguay, or even Panama. Panama, given most recently the Supreme Court decision, the Panamanian Supreme Court, to officially basically kick out C.K. Hutchinson, the Chinese private company, from the 2 ports in the canal. The Chinese responded by now frivolously and capriciously boarding Panama flag vessels, right? So again, it goes back to this playbook of economic coercion, right? On the part of Guatemala and Paraguay, those 2 countries are Taiwan recognizers, and China has responded by, stopping the export of, say, coffee or shrimp or something else from some of those countries in retaliation for political reasons. So basically, to answer your question, I think that as China continues to get more and more powerful, it is seeing that playbook of economic coercion works, and we'll just continue to use that until we find a way to really push back. And that's why I think having an international coalition of democracies that will be able to step in and say, no, this is not right, this is not going to work. In the case of Lithuania, European countries stepped in and said, okay, whatever you're not exporting to China, we're going to take instead. I think it's a great example of ways in which democracies can step up and help other democracies that are being bullied economically by the PRC and others.
Thank you.
Hi, my name is Andrew, and this question is for John. I was glad to see, I had a long-winded question for Representative Gimenez, but unfortunately left. I was glad to see him talk about the countries in South America and whatnot, but I was very disappointed that he didn't mention anything about the Ukraine, which is really the tip of the spear against old school term, Pinko Kami Russia. So I'm interested in your perspective on that, and realizing you don't have a crystal ball, but I have a friend of mine with a professorial side hustle that described the United States as a challenged autocracy at this point. And I've heard the term used by some very intelligent people a couple times since then. So I'd like to see what your take is on that. And I mean, I happened to watch the cabinet meeting yesterday, and it was a total clown show. And these people are running our country. And I was glad you brought up the First Amendment, because Colbert's gone, and it's already been threats of he's just the beginning. So I thought I'd like to get your take on what you see for the future, and obviously the election coming up in November.
Well, thank you for that question. If I have the answer, I would have $10 million and probably vacationing somewhere in the Bahamas right now. But I think it's a very important question. And I think your point is more gesturing in terms of U.S. role, right? Rather than specifically Ukraine. You're using Ukraine as an example, but you're really looking at U.S. foreign policy, right? if we look at, as we go back to what I've said earlier, democracies are messy. We're a democracy. We're one of the greatest democracies, or arguably not the greatest democracy. And we're going to go through messy periods. And we're at a period in which there are a lot of contests, a lot of competition within. One thing, though, I think that in spite of all the changes that we see on the surface, I think there are a lot of structural continuities still in place. And I'll go back, not about Ukraine, but again, using Taiwan, for example, right? Taiwan, there's a lot of people in Taiwan who are very concerned that there's this rhetoric, narrative in Taiwan called US skepticism. The concern is that the US is no longer reliable to support Taiwan. I was actually recently talking to some Taiwanese journalists, a major business magazine in Taiwan, a columnist. And what I point out to him is you also have to, beside from the rhetoric of political elites, of all the media reporting, you also have to look at the structural factors and to what extent those structural factors remain continuous. So again, using Taiwan as an illustration, what we see is that US support for Taiwan, the fundamentals are still in place. We continue to adhere, for example, to the one China policy, and that's different from the one China principle, right? Which means that we acknowledge China has its position, but that doesn't mean we condone it. We continue to support Taiwan by authorizing arms sales. We continue to have relationship with Taiwan. We continue to have senior Congress members like Congressman Gimenez going to Taiwan. And Taiwan, actually, you know, I've been in Washington since the mid-90s, and I've seen the Taiwan mission actually has changed the status, and its access increased dramatically over the years. Very subtle things, but these are very important things. For example, they're able to host their National Day at festivity on the Twin Oaks estate, which belongs to Taiwan. That was something that was not there 30 years ago, right? So all I'm saying is, I guess, I don't know if this really addresses your question, is I think when we look at US foreign policy, we also have to look beyond the rhetoric. We have to go beyond the media reporting. We have to look at the structural factors. And I think there are a lot of fundamentals there that are still present for Taiwan that I think that still is the case when we deal with Europe, we deal with Ukraine. And so oftentimes, you know, it's very easy for us to get caught up with all the rhetoric, with all these things that are causing us a great deal of unease. However, as an analyst, and I'm an analyst, is try to get through that, all that noise, and look at the fundamentals and look at the structure. And I think there are still a lot of continuities and a lot of fundamentals that are still in place.
I just wanted to add something really quickly, which is the lessons learned that are happening between democracies. So you mentioned Ukraine. Ukrainians are going to Taiwan, helping to sort of give those lessons learned to Taiwan, certainly in domestic drone manufacturing and things like that, and vice versa, right? And I actually want to lift up the NGO here, Spirit of America, because they're one of the many NGOs that are really focused on helping to do that, and it's causing incredible dividends going forward.
We have 2 more questions, and also I'm happy afterwards to follow up about Ukraine as well, if you're interested in the catering afterwards. 2 more questions, and then we'll break for food. Yes, please go ahead.
大家好. Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Bayonet. I'm a student at Florida National University, and I'm studying international relations. I have 2 quick questions. First of all, round of applause for this wonderful panelist here that fantastic. This is like, I first started getting involved into this field of study with East Asian focus, primarily in Taiwan with cross-strait relations, and it's fascinating to hear people, you know, get together and talk about it. But I have 2 questions, but I think should I ask 1 or 2 or both? They're quick.
Maybe if you can condense them, just because I
Yes,
want to get
okay,
to the guy behind you as well.
Perfect. Okay, so Taiwan has the lowest birth rate in the entire world. How does the aging demographic affect national security and democracy in Taiwan?
A lot. But again, I would say that the same demographic issue applies to all of East Asia. Japan, South Korea, China, right? So they all have the same demographic issues. So that's something that's inescapable. And that's something that the Taiwanese are wrestling with, right? That's definitely something that they're wrestling with. But with that being said, this is one of those structural factors in which that democracies can work it out, right? So, there's no easy solution. I don't know what the future would hold, right? But to put it simply is that there's going to be impact, but is that the end of the world? Not necessarily, right? Because there are other issues, that there are things that are, and you got to let them play it out. You got to let the people compete, let people contest those ideas and talk about how this goes. But, it's something that you as a student especially, especially if you want to continue to pursue this field, I encourage you to keep on watching this, because this is a very important structural factor that will have regional implications, especially implications also for the United States, right? Given that we are a Pacific nation. We have strong interests in the Indo-Pacific region, right? So
it's a similar issue in Europe as well. If you look at countries like Germany, I mean, this is an issue impacting a lot of rich world countries. So it's something definitely to keep an eye on. But thank you for your question. Yes, go ahead.
It was the second question, really quick. This is just going to be to anyone that knows the most about it, but how does China's imperial history and Sinocentric view of itself affect its operations in Taiwan?
That's a good question.
Real quick.
Let me give a recommendation. Go read a book. There's a book by an ancient Chinese historian named Yuri Pines, P-I-N-E-S. He came out with 2 books in the last 10 years. One of them is about looking at Chinese political culture based on ancient imperial China. He has another one that just came out very recently that basically looked through they've discovered more artifact, things of that nature, and how that really talks about Chinese political culture. The issue here is simply is this, is that if you look at from China, they see themselves as the latest manifestation of a civilization, or civilizational state, if you will. And they continue to hold that it's their responsibility, therefore, to do that, right? Taiwan, in their mindset, is part of that. It's within the realm. It is not considered. So going back to the earlier question about the interception of President Lai's flight, part of the reason is they do that is because they do not see Taiwan as a sovereign entity. They see Taiwan as a renegade province, right? So for them, therefore, they're well within their right to do something like that, where that they may not be as willing or able to do against other countries that have sovereign interests, right? So I would just say, I know that all my panelists have other to share, so I'll stop right there.
If I can just add one more book suggestion, Institutional Genes by Xu Chenggang at Stanford.
That's a long book.
It's a long one, yeah. It's gonna take you a while, probably take us several semesters to go through, but again, it goes through the whole imperial history. And then one more thing, which is in conversations that I've had with mainland Chinese friends, right, and Taiwanese friends, you get this kind of absolute disconnect, right? From the Chinese side, they are 我们的同胞, right? They're our countrymen. We share culture, we share language. Like they should naturally want to become part of us, right? But then they're not necessarily realizing the surveys that happen year after year after year saying that the young generation, our generation, your generation and younger of the Taiwanese people, they very much view themselves as distinct. Yes, very distinct. And so I'm not sure if those surveys are getting up to, Zhongnanhai, to Xi Jinping. They should, because I think that they're kind of talking past each other, which can cause some really dangerous consequences.
And I won't recommend a book, but I will just give like a very quick update that's a bit more to address your question about like the sort of Sinocentric worldview and and this grand historic mission that China's on, yeah, things can change also. So everyone talks about Taiwan, people can also talk about Tibet, but one area in Central East Asia that people don't really talk about is Mongolia. And historically, Mongolia was also part of what you might consider this kind of Chinese imperial realm. But because of issues, particularly with the Russian Empire and the Soviet Union in the 19th and mostly in the early 20th century, things change and the Chinese just don't really claim Mongolia anymore. Maybe some nationalists might, but generally speaking, it's not on the radar of the big controversial topics. And historically, it easily could have been another Tibet or Taiwan, and it's not. So none of this is written in stone. None of this is dictated by God. It can change, and I think that's something to keep important. That nothing is infinite, and nothing is inevitable. So we can talk more about that afterwards. I do want to get to the last question, and I know people are hungry. I'm hungry, so please, yeah. Thank you for the excellent question, though.
All right, thank you all for being here. This will be a quick question so we could get something to eat. So my name is Jonathan Mamarelli. I currently work for United Airlines. I'm also a master's candidate at Harvard University. My question, for many smaller and middle power democracies, especially across Latin America and the Indo-Pacific, there's growing pressure to balance economic relationships with China while still maintaining democratic institutions and strong partnerships with the United States. What lessons from Taiwan's democratic experience do you believe are most applicable for countries trying to preserve political autonomy and democratic resilience without feeling forced into a binary geopolitical choice?
I mean, it's not an easy question or outcome in this moment, but an example. Brazil is going to have elections soon, and it's probably that Flavio Bolsonaro could win that election. Flavio Bolsonaro is an ally from President Trump in this moment. It's my ally from Western USA, sure, but BYD, they invest maybe $1.3 billion in this giant plant back in Brazil. If Flavio Bolsonaro win the election, what do you think is going to do with that plant? I mean, nothing. That promote labor, works, spaces, economic back in Brazil, but he's going to be more aligned with President Trump. So, for Venezuela, for example, maybe the debt with China is 60, 70 billion dollars for the Chinese fund back in early century with Chavez and all that corruption in that moment. We need, if we want to restabilize the economy, the rule of law, we have to restructure our debt, even with China. I mean, for a country that needs to happen. But in a new Venezuela, democratic Venezuela, for sure, we're going to be more aligned with the U.S. The investment back in Latin America for the U.S. is not the highest in this moment. For Uruguay, who wants un tratado de libre comercio, I don't know the translation, free trade agreement, he maybe are waiting for 5 years or more for the free agreement with the U.S. And China is waiting to get in. So, I start with the values. I mean, the core, for me, of the matter, of the issue. But you have to develop a strategic relation with the economy, with the industry, with the enterprises here in the U.S. to look for not only Latin America, but also around the world. China wants not only to export his product, they want to export in this moment his ideology. And I think that's the main problem, and that's why they're going to fail. That mindset is not my ally of Latin America or anybody else. So you're going to go step by step in partnership with countries, enterprises, cultural bases, soft power, I mean, have to, I hope, to win the battle, to good influence around, but in short term, I think, I not only think, the US are looking for Latin America. I mean, this debate, nearshoring, even the tariff has to be with China. I mean, that's the end game in that situation. So we have to promote high-level politics, the correct vision, and take the steps one by one to try to achieve a better realignment of the situation. And bottom, for Latin America, if you have a better understanding and a better correlation, you're gonna have less migration, less gap of the poverty or the breach in Latin America. You have 700 million souls in a similar cultural basis with the democratic values. That's good news in short term. So it's going to be a challenging moment for all of decision makers, students, and everybody around. Thank you for your question.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. And I think this panel, and invite all you to give them a round of applause. I would like to invite any students and also MDC staff up for a quick group photo. And then everyone else, please feel free to go and help yourself. I'm sure the food is waiting. Thank you.